The silk sheets of the Ritz-Carlton penthouse suite whispered against Dante Moretti's skin as he reached for the champagne bottle, completely ignoring the buzzing phone on the nightstand. The name Isabella flashed across the screen for the 4th time in 10 minutes, but he didn't even glance at it. "Aren't you going to answer that?" Vanessa purred beside him, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing patterns across his chest. At 28, she was everything his wife wasn't anymore: exciting, spontaneous, demanding nothing but his attention in moments like these. "She can wait," Dante muttered, his voice carrying the rough edge of his Brooklyn roots despite 20 years of trying to polish it away. "Tonight's about us, baby. No interruptions." He silenced the phone completely, tossing it face down on the marble nightstand where it joined his wedding ring. The heavy platinum band caught the city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a small circle of gold that represented vows he'd stopped honoring months ago. What Dante Moretti didn't know, what the most feared man in New York's underworld couldn't possibly imagine, was that 15 blocks away, his wife Isabella was pressed against their bedroom wall, a kitchen knife trembling in her hands, while a stranger's footsteps echoed through their Tribeca penthouse. Blood was already staining the white carpet where she'd stumbled, and the 911 operator's voice crackled through her dropped phone. Ma'am, are you still there? Help is on the way. Can you tell me where you are in the residence?" But Isabella couldn't answer. She was trying not to breathe, not to make a sound, while the man who'd broken into her home searched room by room, calling her name like they were playing some twisted game of hide-and-seek. The phone buzzed again. Voicemail. Then again. Voicemail. By the time Dante Moretti would finally check his messages, it would be too late to save everything that mattered. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. 6 hours earlier, Isabella Moretti stood in the massive kitchen of their Tribeca penthouse, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable, undeniable. At 29, she'd imagined this moment differently. She'd pictured Dante's arms around her, his dark eyes lighting up with joy, maybe tears streaming down his face as he kissed her and promised her the world. Instead, she was alone in their 6,000-square-foot apartment, and her husband hadn't been home before midnight in 3 months. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the kind of kitchen most people only saw in magazines. Carrara marble countertops, custom Italian cabinets, a refrigerator that cost more than her childhood home. Everything was perfect, pristine, and absolutely empty of warmth. She picked up her phone and typed out a message. "Dante, I really need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come home early today?" Delivered. Read. No response. Isabella set the phone down and wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the familiar ache of loneliness settle in her chest. She'd been Mrs. Dante Moretti for 4 years now, and somewhere along the way, she'd become invisible in her own marriage. The sweet, attentive man who'd pursued her relentlessly during her senior year at NYU, who'd sent flowers to her dorm room, who'd learned her coffee order, who'd made her feel like the most important person in the world, had disappeared. In his place was a stranger who communicated through text messages and came home smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Dante Moretti. Leave a message." "It's me," Isabella said softly, hating how small her voice sounded. "I know you're busy with the shipping negotiations, but something's happened and I really need to talk to you. It's not about dinner plans or shopping or anything trivial. This is different. This is important. Please just call me back." She ended the call and immediately felt foolish. How many times had she said, "It's important," only to discuss mundane household matters? No wonder he'd stopped responding with any urgency. But this time truly was different. Isabella walked to the windows overlooking the Hudson River, watching the morning light dance across the water. Somewhere out there, her husband was building his empire, making deals that would cement the Moretti family's control over New York's ports for the next decade. She understood that his work was dangerous, that he carried responsibilities she could barely imagine. What she didn't understand was when she'd stopped being part of his life at all. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Sophia in Boston. "How's the fairy tale going, Bella? Still living like a princess?" Isabella stared at the message, then looked around the penthouse that felt more like a museum than a home. How could she explain that living in a palace meant nothing when the king had forgotten you existed? She typed back, "Everything's perfect. Living the dream." Another lie to add to her collection. The sound of the elevator in their private foyer made her heart leap. Maybe Dante had gotten her message. Maybe he'd sensed something was wrong and come home early. She rushed toward the entrance, hope fluttering in her chest like a trapped bird. But it was just Marcus, their head of security, doing his morning check. "Morning, Mrs. Moretti," he said respectfully, his eyes kind beneath his stern expression. "Everything okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," Isabella lied automatically. "Just didn't sleep well." Marcus studied her for a moment, and Isabella wondered what he saw. Did he notice the dark circles under her eyes? The weight she'd lost? The way she'd stopped wearing the designer clothes Dante bought her, preferring instead the simple jeans and sweaters from her old life? "Mr. Moretti asked me to remind you about the Castellano wedding this Saturday," Marcus said carefully. "He wants to make sure you wear the emerald Versace gown." Of course he did. Dante always cared about how she looked at public events, how well she represented the Moretti name. What he didn't care about was how she felt, what she thought, whether she was slowly disappearing inside the golden cage he'd built for her. "I'll remember," Isabella said quietly. After Marcus left, she made a decision. She couldn't wait for Dante to find time for her. She needed to see him, to tell him about the baby in person where he couldn't ignore her or dismiss her concerns. She needed to look into his eyes and remember why she'd fallen in love with him in the first place. She grabbed her purse and keys, slipping the pregnancy test into the side pocket. Maybe seeing the physical proof would make him understand the gravity of the situation. As she headed for the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Another text from Sophia. "Seriously though, you sound different lately. Everything okay?" Isabella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, she considered telling Sophia everything about the loneliness, the pregnancy, the growing distance between her and Dante, the sick feeling in her stomach that something was terribly wrong with her marriage. Instead, she typed, "Just missing home. Thinking about visiting soon. You should. Mom would love to see you. And Bella? If you ever need anything, I'm here. You know that, right?" The message made Isabella's eyes burn with unexpected tears. When had she become so isolated that a simple offer of support from her sister felt like a lifeline? "I know. Love you. Love you too. Be safe. Be safe." The words echoed in Isabella's mind as she stepped into the elevator that would take her to the parking garage. She just needed to see her husband, to remind him that she existed, that their marriage existed, that she was about to give him the most important news of their lives. She had no idea that decision would nearly cost her everything. Dante's world, Dante Moretti, commanded his office on the 40th floor of the Moretti Tower like the king he was in New York's underworld. At 37, he possessed the kind of presence that made boardroom executives and street soldiers alike show immediate respect. His tailored Tom Ford suit fit his athletic frame perfectly, and his dark eyes held the cold calculation that had built his empire from his father's modest operations into a billion-dollar enterprise. "The Castellano family thinks they can negotiate for a larger percentage of the port contracts," Dante said, his voice carrying barely a trace of the Brooklyn accent he'd worked years to minimize. "They're mistaken." Around the mahogany conference table sat his most trusted advisors, men who'd proven their loyalty with blood and silence. This meeting would determine the future of shipping operations along the entire eastern seaboard. "What's our response, boss?" asked Marco Santini, his underboss and childhood friend, the only man in the room who remembered when Dante was just another kid from Bensonhurst. "We remind them that certain territories have been Moretti-controlled for 3 generations," Dante replied, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. We make it clear that challenging us comes with consequences they're not prepared to face. His phone buzzed against the mahogany table. Without looking, he reached over and silenced it. Isabella had been particularly needy lately, calling and texting throughout the day about trivial matters. He loved his wife, or at least, he remembered loving her once, but her constant need for attention was becoming a distraction he couldn't afford. The Castellano situation required his complete focus. Another buzz. This time Dante glanced at the screen long enough to see Isabella's name before dismissing the notification. Whatever domestic crisis she was dealing with would have to wait. The shipping contracts he was negotiating represented $40 million annually. His wife's feelings about being lonely or whatever could be addressed later. "Boss," Marco said quietly, his eyes flicking to the phone. "Maybe you should—" "It can wait," Dante cut him off sharply. "My wife doesn't understand the pressure we're under right now. She'll be fine." But even as he said the words, something nagged at him. Isabella had been different lately, quieter, more withdrawn. She'd stopped asking him about his day, stopped trying to plan date nights, stopped lighting up when he came home. He'd attributed it to adjustment, to finally accepting the reality of being married to a man in his position. What if there was something more? He pushed the thought aside. Isabella was safe in their fortress-like penthouse, surrounded by the best. Security money could buy. Whatever she wanted to discuss could wait until he'd secured the Castellano deal. The meeting continued for another 3 hours. Contracts were reviewed, percentages negotiated, territorial boundaries reaffirmed. By the time they broke for lunch, Dante felt confident that the Moretti family's dominance over New York's shipping operations was more secure than ever. His phone showed 7 missed calls from Isabella and 3 voicemails. He didn't listen to them. "You sure everything's okay with Isabella?" Marco asked as they walked to Dante's private office. "She's been calling a lot today." Dante's jaw tightened with irritation. "Isabella knew what she was signing up for when she married me. Sometimes business has to come first." "Yeah, but—" "Drop it, Marco." His assistant, Patricia, appeared in the doorway looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Mr. Moretti, your wife called the office 3 times looking for you." She sounded upset. A flicker of concern crossed Dante's features. "Upset how?" "She said it was urgent, that she needed to speak with you immediately." "When I told her you were in meetings," she asked. Patricia hesitated. "She asked me to please make sure you called her the moment you were free." She said, "Please 3 times, sir." Isabella never called his office. She understood that his business and personal life were kept strictly separate. It was one of the rules they'd established early in their marriage. Did she say what it was about? "No, sir," but she sounded. Patricia searched for the right word. Scared. The word hit Dante like a physical blow. Scared? Isabella was many things sheltered, sometimes naive about his world, occasionally dramatic about minor inconveniences, but she wasn't easily frightened. She'd grown up in a rough neighborhood in Boston, had worked 2 jobs to put herself through NYU. She had steel in her spine, even if she'd learned to hide it behind designer clothes and polite smiles. "Get me, Marcus," Dante ordered, his instincts finally overriding his irritation. Within minutes, his head of security was on the line. "Boss, Mrs. Moretti left the penthouse about 2 hours ago," Marcus reported. "Said she needed to see you. Wanted to come to the office." Dante's blood went cold. "You let her leave alone?" "She insisted, sir. Said she needed to talk to you about something important and couldn't wait. We offered to drive her, but she wanted to drive herself. Said she needed the time to think." "Where is she now?" Last GPS ping from her phone showed her heading north on the FDR. "We've been tracking her location." "But," Marcus paused. "Sir, her phone went offline about 45 minutes ago." The room tilted sideways. Isabella's phone never went offline. She was obsessive about keeping it charged, about staying connected in case he needed to reach her. "Find her," Dante ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Now. We're already on it, boss, but There's something else you should know. Marcus's voice carried a weight that made Dante's stomach clench. Mrs. Moretti hasn't been herself lately. Some of the security team mentioned she seemed depressed. One of them overheard her crying in the bedroom last week. Dante's hand clenched around the phone. His wife had been crying, and he hadn't known, hadn't noticed, hadn't cared enough to ask. There's more, Marco said from across the office, his own phone pressed to his ear, his face pale. One of our guys at Lenox Hill Hospital just called. Isabella's car was found abandoned in the hospital parking garage about 20 minutes ago. Engine still running, driver's door open, purse still inside. The world stopped. Security footage? Dante demanded, already moving toward the elevator. Hospital security is pulling it now. Boss, Marco's voice carried the same careful tone people used when delivering devastating news. There's blood on the driver's seat. Not much, but enough. Dante's vision narrowed to a single point. His wife was missing. There was blood. And he'd spent the afternoon ignoring her calls because he'd assumed she was being needy, dramatic, inconvenient. He finally looked at his phone, at the messages he'd dismissed, at the voicemails he'd been too busy to hear. His hands shook as he pressed play on the first one. It's me. I know you're busy with the shipping negotiations, but something's happened, and I really need to talk to you. It's not about dinner plans or shopping or anything trivial. This is different. This is important. Please just call me back. Her voice sounded small, scared. How had he not heard that? The second message. Dante, I'm coming to see you. I need to tell you something in person. I can't do this over the phone. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Please don't be in a meeting. Please. The third message was just breathing and what sounded like crying before the line went dead. But it was the fourth message, the one he'd never seen the notification. For because he'd silenced his phone completely, that made his blood turn to ice. Isabella's voice, barely a whisper. Dante, someone's following me. A black SUV. It's been behind me since I left the house. I'm scared. I'm going to the hospital instead of your office. There are people there. Security cameras. I'm going to... The message cut off with the sound of screeching tires and Isabella's scream. Dante's phone slipped from his hands, clattering to the floor. Boss? Marco's voice seemed to come from very far away. But Dante couldn't respond, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but replay that scream in his mind, over and over, while his world collapsed around him. His wife had been in danger. She'd tried to tell him. She'd called him 8 times, left 4 voicemails, driven to his office because she was too scared to be alone, and he'd been too busy to answer. Too important. Too focused on business that suddenly meant absolutely nothing. His phone rang. Unknown number. Dante. Snatched it up. Yes? Mr. Moretti. This is Detective Sarah Chen with the NYPD. We need you to come to Lenox Hill Hospital immediately. It's about your wife. The hospital corridor smelled like antiseptic and fear. Dante moved through it like a man in a nightmare, Marco at his side, a small army of his security team trying to look inconspicuous while surrounding him. Detective Chen was waiting in a small conference room, her expression professional but kind. She was younger than Dante expected, maybe early 40s, with intelligent eyes that had clearly seen too much tragedy. Mr. Moretti, thank you for coming so quickly, she began. Where's my wife? Dante's voice was hoarse, raw with panic he couldn't hide. We're still trying to determine that, sir. Your wife's car was found in our parking garage approximately 90 minutes ago. The engine was running, the driver's door was open, and her personal belongings were still inside. You said there was blood. Detective Chen nodded. A small amount on the driver's seat and door handle. We've sent it for analysis, but given the location and circumstances, we believe it's likely your wife's. Dante's knees nearly buckled. Marco caught his arm, steadying him. There's more, the detective continued carefully. Hospital security footage shows your wife arriving at approximately 3:47 p.m. She appeared distressed, looking over her shoulder repeatedly. She parked, exited her vehicle, and began walking toward the hospital entrance. And At 3:51 p.m., a black Escalade with tinted windows pulled up behind her car. 3 men exited the vehicle. Your wife saw them and ran. The men pursued her into the parking garage. At 3:53 p.m., there's footage of a struggle. Your wife fought back, she's clearly visible, striking one of the men in the face. But they overpowered her and forced her into their vehicle. Detective Chen pulled out a tablet and showed him the footage. Dante watched, helpless, as his wife, his beautiful, terrified wife, fought for her freedom. Even on the grainy security footage, he could see her fear, her determination, her courage. One of the men grabbed her arm. Isabella twisted, bringing her knee up hard into his groin. The man doubled over, and for a moment Dante felt a flash of fierce pride. That was his girl. His wife wasn't going down without a fight. But then the other 2 men were on her, and Isabella didn't stand a chance. The Escalade left the garage at 3:55 p.m., Detective Chen continued. We've traced it to the Bronx, where it was found abandoned near Hunts Point. No sign of your wife or the suspects. Dante closed his eyes, trying to think like the strategist he'd been trained to be instead of the terrified husband he'd become. This was professional, he said finally. Coordinated. They knew where she was going, when she'd be vulnerable. We agree, Detective Chen said. Mr. Moretti, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Is there anyone who might want to hurt your wife? Any enemies? Business rivals? Dante laughed, but there was no humor in it. Detective, I'm Dante Moretti. I have more enemies than I can count. But most of them are smart enough to know that touching my family means war. Most of them? The Castellano family, Marco said quietly. We've been in negotiations with them. Tense negotiations. If they wanted to send a message, they'd take my wife, Dante finished, his voice flat. Final. His phone buzzed. Unknown number again. He answered without hesitation. If you want to see your wife alive, you'll listen very carefully. The voice was electronically distorted, impossible to identify, but Dante would know Vincent Castellano's cadence anywhere. Where is she? Dante demanded. Safe. For now. But that could change very quickly depending on how cooperative you're willing to be. What do you want? You know what I want, Dante. The port contracts. Full ownership transferred to Castellano operations. And you're complete. Withdrawal from all shipping activities in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Dante's blood turned to ice. The Castellano family wasn't just trying to negotiate better terms. They were trying to destroy him completely, to take everything his family had built over 3 generations. You have 24 hours, the voice continued. Bring the signed contracts to the warehouse on Pier 57. Come alone, or your pretty wife doesn't come home at all. Let me talk to her, Dante demanded. I need to know she's alive. There was a pause, then shuffling sounds. Then Isabella's voice, small and terrified but alive. Dante? Baby, I'm here. I'm going to get you out of this. I promise, they said. Her voice broke. They said if you don't give them what they want, they're going to kill me. Dante, I'm scared. And I need to tell you something. I need to tell you about... The line went dead. Dante stood frozen, his wife's terrified voice echoing in his mind. Detective Chen was already signaling for a trace, but he knew it would be useless. The Castellanos were professionals. They wouldn't make rookie mistakes. Mr. Moretti, Detective Chen said carefully, I understand you're upset, but we need to contact the FBI. This is now officially a kidnapping case. No. Dante's voice was flat. Final. Sir, I understand you have resources, but this is beyond. You understand nothing. Dante turned to face her fully, and for the first time, she saw the man who'd built an empire through fear and respect. My wife is pregnant and terrified somewhere because I failed to protect her. I will get her back, and I will make the people responsible pay for what they've done. But I will do it my way. Mr. Moretti, if you take the law into your own hands. The law? Dante's laugh was bitter. "Detective, the law doesn't touch men like Vincent Castellano. But I do." He was already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear. "Marco, gather everyone. Every soldier, every associate, everyone who owes us a favor. We're going to war." Isabella woke to darkness and the smell of salt water. Her head pounded like someone had taken a hammer to her skull, and when she tried to move, sharp pain lanced through her wrists. Zip ties. Her hands were bound behind her back, cutting into her skin with every slight movement. Panic flooded her system as fragmented memories rushed back. The black SUV following her, the parking garage, running, fighting. A cloth pressed over her face that smelled sickeningly sweet. Then nothing. Now she was here, wherever here was. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light filtering under a door. She was in a small room, concrete walls, no windows, the distant sound of water lapping against wood. A warehouse near the docks, maybe, the kind of place where screams wouldn't carry. Isabella forced herself to breathe slowly, to think past the terror threatening to consume her. She was alive. That meant something. If they'd wanted her dead, she'd already be at the bottom of the Hudson. They wanted leverage. They wanted Dante. The thought of her husband sent a fresh wave of emotion through her anger, fear, desperate hope. Had he gotten her messages? Did he even know she was missing? Or was he still in his endless meetings, still ignoring her calls, still choosing everything else over her? The baby. Oh God, the baby. Isabella's bound hands tried instinctively to reach her stomach. She was maybe 6 weeks pregnant. Barely anything yet, just a cluster of cells that represented every hope she'd ever had for their future. She had to protect this child, had to survive. The door opened with a metallic screech that made her flinch. A man stepped in tall, thin, with cold eyes and a smile that made her skin crawl. He was older, maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of expensive suit that meant he was someone important in whatever organization had taken her. "Mrs. Moretti," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I'm so glad you're awake. I apologize for the accommodations. I'm afraid comfort wasn't the priority." Isabella said nothing, just stared at him with as much defiance as she could muster while zip-tied and terrified. "My name is Vincent Castellano," he continued, crouching down so they were at eye level. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced, though I've seen you at various functions. You're even more beautiful up close." The way he said it made Isabella's stomach turn. "What do you want?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "What I want is for your husband to understand that actions have consequences. He's been very greedy lately, taking things that don't belong to him. Territory, contracts, respect." Vincent's smile never reached his eyes. "He needs to be reminded that even the great Dante Moretti has weaknesses. I don't know anything about Dante's business. Of course you don't. You're just the pretty little wife who lives in the penthouse and spends his money." Vincent stood, looking down at her with something like pity. "But you're also his weakness, and weaknesses can be exploited." Isabella thought of the pregnancy test in her purse, still in her abandoned car. The baby Dante didn't even know existed. If these men found out she was pregnant, would they use that too? Or would it make her even more expendable? "He'll give you whatever you want," she said, hoping it was true. "Just don't hurt me." "Oh, I'm counting on that. Your husband is about to learn a very valuable lesson about the cost of ambition." Vincent walked toward the door, then paused. "Someone will bring you food and water. I suggest you eat. We may need you looking healthy for the cameras." "Cameras? How else will we prove to your husband that you're alive?" "He'll want proof, and we'll be happy to provide it. For a price." The door closed, and Isabella heard multiple locks engaging. She was alone again, but her mind was racing. Dante would come for her. Whatever, their problems, whatever distance had grown between them, he wouldn't abandon her. He'd built his entire reputation on protecting what was his, and she was still his wife. She just had to survive long enough for him to find her. The war room. The Moretti family compound in Staten Island looked like a fortress, and tonight it functioned as one. Every soldier, every captain, every man who owed allegiance to the Moretti name had been summoned. They filled the main house, spilling out into the courtyard, all waiting for orders from their boss. Dante stood in his father's old office, now his office, staring at a map of New York spread across the massive desk. Red pins marked Castellano operations. Blue pins marked his own. The city was a chessboard, and Vincent Castellano had just made a move that would end in checkmate for one of them. "Boss, everyone's here," Marco said from the doorway. "What do you want to tell them?" Dante turned to face the room, gradually filling with his most hairy, trusted men. These were the soldiers who'd fought beside him, the captains who'd proven their loyalty, the advisors who'd helped him build something greater than his father ever dreamed. "Vincent Castellano has declared war," Dante said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "He took my wife." A ripple of shock moved through the assembled men. In their world, there were rules, unwritten but absolute. Family was sacred. Wives and children were off limits, no matter how bitter the rivalry. "My pregnant wife," Dante added, and the shock turned to outrage. He hadn't known about the pregnancy until Detective Chen had handed him Isabella's purse, still sitting in her abandoned car. Inside, along with her phone and wallet, had been a small white stick with 2 pink lines, a pregnancy test, positive. The discovery had nearly broken him. Isabella had been trying to tell him they were going to have a baby, and he'd been too busy, too important, too goddamn selfish to listen. "This is a violation of everything we stand for," said Anthony Romano, one of his oldest captains. "The other families will back us on this. Even the Castellanos' allies won't support attacking a pregnant woman." "I don't want their support," Dante said coldly. "I want blood. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what Dante was saying. This wasn't about respect or territory anymore. This was personal. This was about a man who'd failed to protect his wife and was about to burn the world down to get her back. "What's the plan?" Marco asked. Dante pointed to the map. "The Castellanos have 3 main operations. Their social club in Little Italy, their shipping office in Brooklyn, and the warehouse complex where Vincent wants to make the exchange. While I go to meet Vincent at Pier 57, you hit everything else simultaneously. That's suicide," someone muttered, going alone to meet them. "It's what Vincent expects. He thinks I'm desperate, that I'll walk into his trap and surrender everything to save Isabella." Dante's smile was cold, calculated. "He's right about the desperate part, but he's wrong about the surrender." He pulled out his phone and played the recording of Vincent's call, letting everyone hear the demands, the threats, Isabella's terrified voice. "The Castellanos think they can destroy us by taking what we love," Dante continued. "They're about to learn what happens when you threaten a Moretti's family." The plan came together with brutal efficiency. While Dante went to the warehouse for the exchange, his men would simultaneously hit every Castellano operation in the city. Bank accounts would be frozen through carefully placed contacts. Allies would be offered better deals to switch sides. Low-level soldiers would be given a choice: join the Moretti family or share the Castellanos' fate. By the time the sun rose, Vincent's organization would cease to exist. "What about the contracts?" asked Paolo, his financial advisor. "Do we actually give them what they want?" Dante's expression was ice. "We'll give them exactly what they deserve." As his men dispersed to prepare, Marco lingered behind. "Dante," he said quietly, using his boss's first name in a way few people dared. "Are you sure about this? If something goes wrong, nothing's going wrong." Dante cut him off. "I'm getting my wife back. And if it's a trap? If Vincent plans to kill you both? Then I die knowing I finally put Isabella first." Dante's voice cracked slightly on his wife's name. "I spent our entire marriage treating her like she was secondary to everything else. My business, my reputation, my fucking pride. She was trying to tell me about our baby, and I couldn't be bothered to answer the phone. Marco gripped his friend's shoulder. You'll get her back. You'll have a chance to make it right. I have to, Dante said simply. Because if I don't, if I lose her because of my own stupidity, there won't be enough blood in this city to wash away the guilt. Isabella's fight hours blended together in the darkness. Isabella had no way to track time, no window to show her if it was day or night. Her captors brought her water and a sandwich that she forced herself to eat. Thinking of the baby, she had to stay strong. The door opened again, and this time it was a different man. Younger, maybe 30, with nervous energy and eyes that wouldn't quite meet hers. Mrs. Moretti, he said, setting down a bottle of water. I need to take your picture. For your husband. What kind of picture? Proof of life. He needs to see you're okay. The man pulled out a phone and what looked like today's newspaper. Hold this up. Look at the camera. Isabella's mind raced. This was her chance. If Dante saw her, really looked at the image, maybe she could communicate. Something useful. Can you untie my hands? She asked. Just for the picture? I can't hold the newspaper like this. The young man hesitated. Please, Isabella added, letting her voice crack authentically. My wrists are bleeding. I can't feel my fingers anymore. I'm not going to try anything. Where would I even go? After a long moment, he nodded and cut the zip ties. Blood rushed painfully back into Isabella's hands. She rubbed her wrists, trying to restore circulation, taking stock of her surroundings with quick glances. Concrete room, single door with multiple locks, no windows, but there, in the corner, a shipping label partially visible on an old crate. Castellano Imports, Pier 57. Hold up the paper, the man instructed, raising his phone. Isabella did, but she positioned her hands carefully, making sure her bleeding wrists were visible, making sure Dante would see what they'd done to her. And in the background, just barely visible if you knew to look, the shipping label. With their location, the flash went off 3 times. Good, the man said, already moving toward the door. That should do it. Wait, Isabella called out. Can I ask you something? He paused, looking wary. Do you have a wife? A girlfriend? Anyone you love? The man's jaw tightened. Why? Because I'm pregnant, Isabella said, the words tumbling out. 6 weeks. My husband doesn't even know yet. I was trying to tell him when your people took me. So I'm asking you, as someone who maybe understands love, please don't let them kill me. Please don't let them kill my baby. For a moment, something flickered in the man's eyes. Guilt? Sympathy? But then his expression hardened again. I'm just following orders, lady. It's nothing personal. It's personal to me, Isabella said quietly. And it will be personal to my husband when he finds out about the baby. Please, just think about it. The door closed, locks engaging, and Isabella was alone again. But she'd planted a seed. Maybe it would grow into something, maybe not. But she had to try everything, use every weapon at her disposal. Her hands free now, she explored the small room more thoroughly. The concrete was solid, no weak points she could exploit. The door was reinforced steel. The crate in the corner was empty except for old packing materials. But beneath those materials she found something useful. A piece of broken metal, maybe 3 inches long, jagged on one end. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Isabella tucked it into her waistband and waited. The photograph Dante's phone buzzed with an incoming message from an unknown number. A photograph loaded slowly, and when it finally appeared, his world tilted sideways. Isabella, his beautiful wife, looking exhausted and terrified but alive. She held today's New York Times, proving the photo was recent, but it was the details that made Dante's hands shake with rage. Her wrists were bleeding, raw wounds where zip ties had cut into her skin. Her left cheek bore a bruise he hadn't noticed in the security footage. Her eyes, usually so full of warmth, were hollow with fear. But there was something else in those eyes, a focus, an intensity. She wasn't just staring at the camera, she was trying to communicate something. "Marco, get over here," Dante called. His underboss appeared immediately, taking in the photo. "She's alive. That's good. Look closer." Dante zoomed in on the background. "What's that behind her?" Marco squinted. "Looks like a shipping label? Castellano Imports, Pier 57. She's telling us where she is," Dante breathed. "My brilliant wife is telling us exactly where they're holding her. Could be a fake," Marco warned. "A way to lure us into a trap. It's not fake. Look at her hands." Dante zoomed in on Isabella's fingers. They were positioned oddly, not quite natural, and if you looked carefully, she was making a sign. 5 fingers on one hand, 7 on the other. Pier 57. "She's confirming it," Dante said, admiration mixing with his fear. "She's scared out of her mind, but she's thinking strategically. She's fighting back the only way she can." His phone rang. Vincent Castellano again. "Did you receive my gift?" Vincent's distorted voice asked. "I got it. Now let me talk to my wife." "In due time. First, we discuss terms. The contracts, I'll sign whatever you want." Dante interrupted. "Every port, every territory, every business interest from here to Boston, it's yours. Just give me back my wife." There was a pause on the other end, and Dante could almost hear Vincent's surprise. The great Dante Moretti, surrendering without a fight? It was too easy. Too suspicious. "You expect me to believe you'd give up everything you've built?" Vincent asked carefully. "I expect you to understand what it means when a man realizes he's been living wrong," Dante said, and he meant every word. "I built an empire, Vincent. But I almost lost the only thing that actually matters. My wife. My child. My family. So yes, you can have the ports. You can have the territories. You can have everything except Isabella." "How touching," Vincent said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The great Dante Moretti, brought to his knees by love. "By stupidity," Dante corrected. "I was too proud to see what I had, too arrogant to appreciate it, too busy building power to realize I already had everything I needed. Don't make that same mistake, Vincent. I'm not the one who made mistakes, Dante. You disrespected my family. You undercut our operations. You acted like the Castellanos were beneath you." "You're right," Dante said simply. "I was wrong. I apologize. Now can we please make this exchange and end this?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Pier 57. Warehouse 3. Midnight tomorrow. Bring the signed contracts transferring all your shipping operations to Castellano control. Come alone. If I see any of your men, if I detect any surveillance, if you try anything clever, your wife dies. And..." "Dante?" Vincent's voice turned cold. "If those contracts aren't legitimate, if you think you can double-cross me, I'll make sure you watch her die before I kill you too." The line went dead. Marco was already pulling up surveillance data on Pier 57. "It's a trap. Has to be." "Of course it's a trap," Dante agreed. "But Isabella's there. She told us so, which means we're walking into it anyway. Then we do it smart. We position men. No men. Vincent will be watching for that. He'll have counter-surveillance, thermal imaging, probably drones. If he sees anyone else, he kills Isabella. So, what's the play?" Dante smiled, and it was the most dangerous expression Marco had ever seen on his friend's face. "The play is that I'm not the same man Vincent Castellano thinks he's dealing with. He thinks I'm the arrogant boss who cares more about power than people. He's about to meet the man who's willing to burn his entire empire to save his wife. Boss, get me everything we have on Pier 57's layout. Every entrance, every exit, every sightline. And Marco?" Dante's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Get me the name of every Castellano soldier who was involved in taking Isabella. Every single one. Because, when this is over, when my wife is safe, there's going to be a reckoning." The longest hours Isabella had lost track of how many hours she'd been in the dark room. Could have been 12 hours. Could have been 24. Time became meaningless when measured only by fear and the ache of her bound wrists. They'd zip-tied her again after the photo and the growing desperation to know if Dante had received her message. The door opened again. Vincent Castellano himself this time, flanked by 2 armed men. "Mrs. Moretti," he said pleasantly, as if they were meeting at a cocktail party. "I have good news. Your husband has agreed to all our terms. Tomorrow night, you'll be reunited." Isabella's heart leaped with hope before suspicion crushed it. "Why should I believe you?" "Because your husband loves you more than he loves his empire. It's really quite touching." Vincent crouched down, studying her face. "I almost feel bad about this. You seem like a nice woman. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong husband. What happens tomorrow?" Isabella asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Tomorrow, your husband brings me contracts that will make the Castellano family the most powerful organization in New York. And in exchange, you go free. And then," Vincent's smile faded, "and then your husband learns to live with his choices. He built an empire on the backs of families like mine. He acted like he was untouchable. Now he knows better. You took a pregnant woman hostage to teach my husband humility?" Isabella couldn't keep the disgust from her voice. "You're a monster." "I'm a businessman," Vincent corrected. "Your husband would have done the same in my position." "No," Isabella said firmly. "He wouldn't. Dante has many faults, but he would never hurt an innocent woman, never hurt a child." "How noble of him," Vincent's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Too bad that nobility didn't extend to how he treated you. I've had people watching you for months, Mrs. Moretti. I know how often you eat alone, how often you cry when you think no one's listening, how often your husband chooses everything else over you." The words hit harder than any physical blow because they were true. "He's coming for me," Isabella said quietly. "Whatever you think you know about Dante, whatever mistakes he's made, he's coming for me." "Oh, I'm counting on it." Vincent stood, brushing invisible dust from his expensive suit. "Get some rest, Mrs. Moretti. Tomorrow's going to be a very long day." After he left, Isabella allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears slid down her cheeks as she thought about Dante, about their broken marriage, about the baby he didn't know existed, about all the ways she'd become invisible in her own life. But then she thought about the look in his eyes when they'd first met, when he'd pursued her with single-minded determination, when he'd made her feel like the most important person in the world. That man was still in there somewhere. That man would come for her. She just had to survive long enough to see him again. Isabella's hand moved to the piece of jagged metal she'd hidden in her waistband. Tomorrow, when they moved her for the exchange, she'd fight. She'd do whatever it took to survive. For herself. For her baby. For the chance to tell Dante everything she'd been trying to say. She closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness. "I'm pregnant, Dante. We're going to have a baby. Please find me. Please don't be too late." Midnight approaches 23 hours and 47 minutes after Isabella was taken. Dante stood in his office, staring at the signed contracts that would destroy everything he'd built. Every port operation, every shipping route, every business interest his family had cultivated. Over 3 generations, all of it, signed over to Vincent Castellano. "These are real," Marco said, reading through them with growing horror. "Boss, if you give him these, I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because these contracts are ironclad. Once Castellano has them, there's no getting them back. We'll be finished." "We'll be alive," Dante corrected. "Isabella will be alive. Our child will be alive. Everything else can be rebuilt." Marco set the contracts down carefully. "You've changed." "No," Dante said quietly. "I'm finally becoming the man I should have been all along. The man Isabella deserves." His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Pier 57, Warehouse 3, 1 hour. Come alone or she dies." Dante checked his weapon, a Glock 19, familiar weight in his hand, and tucked it into the holster at his back. He knew he'd probably have to surrender it. Knew Vincent would search him. But he'd feel better having it for as long as possible. "Boss," Marco said as Dante headed for the door. If something goes wrong, you destroy the Castellano family. Every member, every operation, every ally. You burn it all to the ground." Dante's voice was ice. "But nothing's going wrong. I'm bringing my wife home." The drive to Pier 57 took 43 minutes through New York traffic. Dante used every second to prepare himself mentally. This was the most important negotiation of his life, and he couldn't afford to make a single mistake. Pier 57 loomed in the darkness, a massive warehouse complex that had once housed shipping operations for half of Manhattan. Now it was mostly abandoned, the perfect place for a clandestine exchange. Warehouse 3 sat at the far end of the pier, surrounded by dark water on 3 sides. Dante counted at least a dozen men positioned around the perimeter. Castellano soldiers, all armed, all watching him approach. His phone buzzed one last time. "Marco, we're in position. Say the word and we move," Dante typed back. "Hold. Do nothing unless I give the signal." He stepped out of his car, hands visible, the envelope of contracts held loosely at his side. "Mr. Moretti," a voice called from the warehouse entrance. "So good of you to join us. Please come in. But first, my men need to search you." 2 soldiers approached. Dante allowed them to pat him down, to take his gun, his phone, his wallet. They were thorough, professional. When they were satisfied he was unarmed, they nodded toward the warehouse. Dante walked through the massive sliding doors into a space lit by harsh industrial lights. And there, in the center of the warehouse, tied to a chair, was Isabella, his wife, his world. Alive but terrified, with bruises on her face and blood on her wrists. Their eyes met across the warehouse, and Dante saw everything he'd been too blind to see before. The love she still had for him despite everything, the fear, the desperate hope, the silent plea, "Get us out of here." "Isabella," he breathed, taking upon us. "Step toward her." "Not so fast." Vincent Castellano emerged from the shadows, a gun in his hand. "First, we discuss business." The warehouse felt like a tomb, cold, dark, and reeking of salt water and diesel fuel. Dante forced himself to look away from Isabella, to focus on Vincent Castellano standing 20 feet away, with a gun pointed casually at his wife's head. "The contracts," Vincent said, extending his free hand. "Let's see what you brought me." Dante held up the envelope. "Let me see my wife first. Let me make sure she's okay. You're not in a position to make demands, Dante. Neither are you." Dante's voice was steady, controlled. "If you kill her, these contracts mean nothing. You'll have started a war you can't win. Every family in New York will turn against you for breaking the most sacred rule. So, let's stop pretending you have all the power here and make this exchange like civilized men." Vincent's jaw tightened, but after a moment he nodded. 2 minutes, then we do. This my way." Dante crossed the warehouse floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. Up close, Isabella looked even worse. Her beautiful face was bruised, her wrists raw and bleeding, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. But she was alive. She was here. "Baby," he whispered, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't answer. I'm so sorry for everything." "Dante," Isabella's voice cracked. "There's something I need to tell you." "I know about the baby," he said gently, carefully touching her bruised cheek. "I found the test in your purse." "Isabella, I know, and I'm going to get you both out of here. I promise." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "They're going to kill us," Vincent told me. "He's going to take the contracts and kill us anyway. There are explosives," she dropped her voice to barely a whisper, "under my chair. He's planning to blow the warehouse." Dante's blood turned to ice, but he kept his expression neutral. "Did they hurt you? The baby?" "I'm okay. We're okay. But Dante, you can't give him those contracts. Your family, Means nothing without you. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing in her scent beneath the fear and sweat. I built an empire, and almost lost the only thing that mattered. I won't make that mistake again. Time's up, Vincent called. Step away from her, Dante. Dante stood slowly, his mind racing through every possible scenario. If there were explosives under Isabella's chair, cutting her free could trigger them. But leaving her tied up meant she couldn't run when things went bad, and things were definitely going bad. He walked back to Vincent and handed over the envelope. Vincent pulled out the contracts, his eyes scanning the legal language. These look legitimate. They are. Every port from here to Boston, every shipping route, every warehouse, it's all yours. Now let my wife go. Not quite yet. Vincent pulled out his phone and photographed each page, presumably sending them to his lawyers for verification. I need to make sure you didn't try to slip any clauses past me. The seconds stretched into minutes. Dante counted each one, calculating distances, angles, the positions of Vincent's men. There were 8 soldiers in the warehouse, all armed. Even if Dante could get to Isabella, even if he could get her out of the chair without triggering the explosives, they'd never make it to the door. Unless. His hand moved subtly to his watch, a Rolex his father had given him, but also something more, something Vincent's men hadn't recognized during their search. He pressed the crown 3 times in quick succession. The signal. Outside, Marco would be moving into position. The contracts check out, Vincent said finally, a smile spreading across his face. Congratulations, Dante. You just made me the most powerful man in New York. And now you let us go. About that, Vincent's smile turned cold. See? I have a problem. If I let you walk out of here, even powerless, you're still Dante Moretti. You still have connections, respect, the ability to rebuild. And I can't have that. We had a deal. We had a transaction. You gave me what I wanted. But I never promised you'd live to regret it. Vincent raised his gun, pointing it directly at Isabella. I'm sorry, Mrs. Moretti. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong husband. Everything happened at once. The warehouse doors exploded inward as armored vehicles crashed through. Marco's voice boomed over a megaphone. NYPD. Drop your weapons. Vincent's men spun toward the doors, confused, trying to understand how police had found them. Dante launched himself at Vincent, tackling him before he could pull the trigger. They hit the ground hard, Dante's hands closing around Vincent's wrist, fighting for control of the gun. Isabella, her hand still bound, tipped her chair sideways to avoid the gunfire erupting around her. She hit the concrete hard, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. But she was alive, moving, fighting. The explosives, she screamed. Under the chair. One of Vincent's soldiers ran toward her. Whether to kill her or use her as a hostage, Isabella never knew. She rolled, bringing her legs up, kicking hard at his knees. The man stumbled, and Isabella saw her chance. The piece of jagged metal she'd hidden, still tucked in her waistband. With her hands bound behind her, she couldn't reach it easily. But she twisted, contorted, her shoulders screaming in pain as she stretched. Her fingers closed around the metal, sharp edge cutting into her palm as she worked it free. The soldier was getting up. Isabella didn't have time to cut her zip ties. Instead, she gripped the metal shard like a knife and drove it into his leg with every ounce of strength she had. The man screamed, collapsing. Across the warehouse, Dante and Vincent were still struggling for the gun. Vincent was strong, desperate, fighting for his empire and his life. But Dante was fighting for something more, powerful than ambition or greed. He was fighting for his wife, for his child, for the future he'd almost thrown away. With a surge of strength born from desperation and love, Dante slammed Vincent's wrist against the concrete floor. Once, twice. The gun clattered away, skittering across the floor. You betrayed everything, Vincent gasped. You brought the police. I brought justice, Dante corrected, his forearm pressed against Vincent's throat. You took an innocent woman, a pregnant woman. You broke every rule we have. And yes, I called the police. Because some things are more important than our code. You're finished, Vincent spat. Even if you save her, you gave me everything. The contracts are real, legal. I win. Dante smiled. Read the fine print, Vincent. Clause 47, subsection B. Every contract is null and void if obtained under duress or through criminal action, which Detective Chen is going to prove you did. By the time your lawyers finish reading, you'll be in federal prison. Vincent's face went white with rage and realization. Around them, the battle was ending. Vincent's soldiers, outnumbered and outgunned, were surrendering. Detective Chen emerged from behind an armored vehicle, her weapon drawn but her expression satisfied. Mr. Moretti, she called, step away from him. We'll take it from here. Dante stood, leaving Vincent on the ground for the police to collect. He ran to Isabella, who was sawing frantically at her zip ties with the bloody piece of metal. Don't move, he said urgently. The explosives. There aren't any, Isabella gasped. I lied. I saw Vincent smile when I mentioned them. He was bluffing, trying to keep you from trying anything. The chair is just a chair. Dante's hands shook as he cut through the zip ties properly, freeing her wrists. Isabella fell into his arms, and he held her like he'd never let go. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry for everything, for ignoring you, for making you feel invisible, for not being there when you needed me. You came, Isabella said, her voice muffled against his chest. When it mattered most, you came. I'll always come for you, always. He pulled back to look at her face, gently touching the bruises. Both of you, our baby. Isabella, I promise you, everything's going to change. I'm going to change. The contracts are worthless. I had my lawyers draft them with built-in protections. Vincent gets nothing except a prison cell. Dante kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. But I meant what I said. I would have given him everything real if that's what it took. You matter more than any empire. Detective Chen approached, her expression gentler now. Mrs. Moretti, we need to get you to a hospital. Get you checked out. The baby. We'll make sure the baby's fine, Detective Chen assured her. But we need to go now. As paramedics loaded Isabella into an ambulance, Dante climbed in beside her, refusing to leave her side. Through the open doors, he watched Vincent Castellano being led away in handcuffs, his organization in ruins, his empire crumbling. Is it really over? Isabella asked quietly. Yes, Dante said firmly. It's over. Vincent will spend the rest of his life in federal prison. His family's finished. And he placed his hand gently over her stomach. We get to start over. 3 months later, the brownstone in Brooklyn was nothing like their Tribeca penthouse. It was smaller, warmer, filled with natural light and the kind of character that came from age and history rather than expensive designers. Isabella loved every inch of it. She stood in the nursery they were preparing, painting the walls a soft sage green, while Dante assembled a crib, cursing quietly at the incomprehensible instructions. I run a multi-million-dollar empire, but I can't figure out how Part C connects to Part D, he muttered. Isabella laughed, the sound free and genuine. Want me to help? No, you're supposed to be resting. Doctor's orders. I'm painting a wall, not running a marathon. She set down her brush and moved to his side, studying the instructions. There. Part C goes here. Then Part D slides in. My brilliant wife, Dante said, kissing her temple. The changes in their life had been profound. Dante had stepped back from day-to-day operations, promoting Marco to handle most of the business while he focused on restructuring the organization into legitimate enterprises. The shipping operations were still there, but now they operated within legal boundaries. The protection rackets were being phased out. The violence that had defined his father's generation was ending with his. It wasn't easy. Some of the old guard resisted. But Dante had made his choice, and he enforced it with the same iron will he'd once used to build his empire. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his hand moving to her growing belly. At 14 weeks, Isabella was just starting to show. "Good. Better than good. Actually." She covered his hand with hers. "The doctor said everything looks perfect. The baby's healthy, growing right on schedule. And you? No more nightmares?" Isabella had been having nightmares about the kidnapping, waking up gasping, certain she was back in that dark room, but they were getting less frequent. "Not last night," she said honestly. "I think I'm healing. We both are." Dante pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, as if she were made of glass. "I know I can't undo the past, Isabella. I can't take back all the times I ignored you, dismissed you, made you feel small. But I can promise you the future. I can promise that every day for the rest of our lives, you'll know you're the most important thing in my world. We," Isabella corrected softly, "we're the most important thing. Me and this baby. And any other babies we decide to have," Dante added with a small smile. "Let's get through this one first." Isabella laughed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "How's the reformed Mafia boss treating you?" Isabella typed back. "Like a queen. Annoying, actually. He won't let me lift anything heavier than a throw pillow. Good. He owes you at least a year of being overprotective. Try a lifetime." Isabella smiled as she set her phone down. Her sister had visited twice since the kidnapping, had seen the changes in Dante firsthand, and finally believed that her little sister's fairy tale had found its happy ending. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked, watching her face. "How different everything is now. 3 months ago, I was invisible in my own marriage. Now I can't go to the bathroom without you asking if I need anything." "Too much?" Dante asked, concern flickering across his face. "No," Isabella said firmly. "It's exactly right. This is who I needed you to be all along." That evening, they sat on their back patio, watching the sunset paint Brooklyn's skyline in shades of orange and gold. Dante's hand rested protectively on Isabella's belly, feeling the flutter of movement that the doctor had said they'd start noticing soon. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked quietly. "Giving up so much of the business? Changing everything?" "Never," Dante said without hesitation. "I spent years building power and respect and an empire that meant nothing without you. Vincent Castellano taught me that. When he took you, when I thought I'd lost you, I realized that everything I'd built was worthless if I didn't have you to share it with. We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Isabella asked, and Dante heard the vulnerability beneath the question. The woman who'd been ignored and dismissed and kidnapped, asking if she could really trust this new version of their life. "We're going to be better than okay," Dante promised. "We're going to be happy. Really, genuinely happy. Because I'm not the man I was 3 months ago, Isabella. That man ignored his wife's calls and almost lost everything. This man," he gestured to, "himself. This man knows what matters." Isabella leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his arms, the absolute certainty in his voice. "I love you," she said. "Even when I was scared and alone in that warehouse, even when I thought we might die, I still loved you. I need you to know that." "I love you too," Dante replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than power, more than respect, more than life itself. You and our baby are my world now. My only world." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the Moretti family sat together in their Brooklyn brownstone, no longer surviving their love story but truly living it. The man who had once ignored his wife's desperate calls now treasured every word she spoke, and the woman who had once felt invisible in her own marriage now knew with absolute certainty that she was the center of her husband's universe. In the distance, the city hummed with life and possibility. But for Dante and Isabella, everything they needed was right there in each other's arms, in the baby growing between them, in the future they'd nearly lost but had fought to reclaim. The warehouse on Pier 57 would eventually be demolished, erasing the physical space where their lives had almost ended. But the memory of that night of fighting for each other, of choosing love over pride, of becoming the people they were meant to be, would stay with them forever. Not as trauma, but as a reminder. A reminder that some calls should never be ignored, that some people are worth risking everything for. That sometimes the greatest empire you can build isn't made of money or power or respect. It's made of love, trust, and the courage to change. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.